I just finished watching the 4th film of the Digimon Adventure Tri series, Lost, which at the time of this recording is the latest one available, and I loved it. Considering that Lost is part 4 of a 6-part series, I'm only left wanting more. But I didn't initially start off this way. Hell, when Adventure Tri was first announced, I rode the hype train for all of 2 minutes. When it finally came out in 2015, I logged into Crunchyroll, I put on the first episode, and I felt so disconnected. The first episode starts off very somber in the tale that's about to be presented to us. There's talk of a godly being while a digital egg is being formed with all the pixels being white except for this one black one. We're then shown Tai's room while simultaneously seeing the current adventure Digidestined falling over. Why isn't Kari and TK there? Pretty much the entire first episode is centered around Tai and Matt both having their own things that they want their friends to attend to. The only Digimon that we see in the entire first episode is the mindless Kuwagamon. Kari and TK are still friends, but I can't figure out why they're not with the Adventure 2 Digidestined. Joe is still a bookworm that I remember him to be, Mimi is still girly, and in America, Tai is playing soccer and Matt is a musician, and Sora is maybe not in a love triangle with Matt and Tai. And Izzy is busy with his parents. The old gang are still friends, almost estranged, but still friends. All of them are now living their lives without their Digimon, which is okay, I guess. When I first watched this episode back in 2015, it wasn't enough to make me want to watch the next one right away. I never intentionally dropped the show, but my Crunchyroll queue had this image of Izzy forever. Months had passed by, and I even want to say that the second Tri movie had dropped, and I had yet to watch the second episode. Until finally, I got sick of seeing this image that I decided to watch the next episode just so that I would get the new episode photo to look at on the queue. Adventure Tri is an amazing series, and I can't help but hate myself for that for not seeing it sooner. But honestly, I just didn't know any better. As I mentioned, there was a huge disconnect, and I think that the reason for this is from only watching the dub as a kid. Generally, all the characters are still the same. Like I said, Tai plays soccer, Matt does music, Joe studies, and so on. However, the immediate thing to notice is that the names are different. Tai is actually Taichi, Kari is Hikari, Izzy is Koshiro, TK is Takeru, and Matt is Yamato. I went a decade, and maybe some, not knowing the real names of the cast. The character names are different, almost making it feel like you're watching a different show, but I actually prefer the Japanese names, and so for the rest of this video, I'll be referring to them as such. When I first heard Butterfly after the opening scenes of Reunion, I thought it was a cool song, but it didn't do anything for me. I actually thought it was a new song. It wasn't until later on that I found out that this is the head chala to the Digimon franchise. Part of me thinks that maybe I had grown past the series and I wouldn't be able to appreciate its comeback, but when Agumon showed up in episode 2 of Reunion to protect Taichi, I felt a surge of goosebumps spread throughout my arms. And with the second episode concluding and essentially the gang finally coming together with their Digimon, I felt more of an incentive to continue watching. However, it wasn't right away, as it did take me some time to finally get around to watching part 3 of Reunion, only it didn't take me as long as it took me to watch part 2. So what caused this change in me? Why did I decide to finally give Adventure Tri the viewership that I always wanted to, but never getting around to doing? It was when I seen that the Digimon movie was suggested to me on my YouTube feed. Digimon the movie? Yeah, I remember watching that in theaters with my dad, and so I added it to my offline list. And later on, when I went to watch the movie, I noticed some lines of dialogue that just didn't sit right. Also, I need to mention, at some point, I came across something stating that the Digimon movie was 3 standalone films in Japan that deliberately got stitched together for a theatrical release. With that said, by the time that part 2 of the movie was playing, you know when Omegamon makes his over-the-top emotional appearance on the internet and thus preventing a missile crisis, Taichi kept talking about how his mom was a terrible cook, which wasn't all that funny of a joke. Then there was a line in Taichi's letter of apology to Sora about him throwing up in her hat, which was something that had carried over from part 1 of the film. Besides trying to form some cohesiveness between the 2 standalone films, the lines of dialogue were pretty much weak. Throughout both part 1 and 2 of the film, Hikari, who was the narrator, kept referring to their friend Willis, who was somehow involved in his own unseen storyline. That's when all of it clicked. I remembered about the films originally being standalone stories, and before part 3 started, I stopped watching and I went to go check out part 1 in Japanese. I started wondering if there were any other dub changes throughout the film, and yeah, there was a shit ton. Besides the scene of the kid's drunken father being cut from the film, there were many lines of cheesy dialogue being filled where silence used to be. The film ended up with Butterfly as the song credits. This was probably when I started to notice the relevance of this song. I then went back to watch Digimon Adventure, and I clicked a random episode in the Vandemon arc in Japanese, and then I compared and contrasted with the English, and I found that the show had always been littered with dub changes. And with that, I now felt a surge to go back to the start of the franchise and watch it the way it was originally created. I started with episode 1 of Adventure. Just from watching the first few episodes, I was able to see that the show was very much different. The effect of Braveheart, the Evolution battle song, better sets the mood for the show. And to add even more to the enjoyment, I started watching and following alongside the Digimon podcast, Lost in Translation Mon, a podcast with 2 co-hosts who discuss the narrative of Digimon while comparing and contrasting with the English dub and the Japanese dub. Their discussions give you insight for the English version, so you can truly appreciate the Japanese version, while also knowing what major changes were done to the English version. For example, Mimi was dubbed by Mei and Jay as Momo, or Mumu, because they didn't see her Valley Girl personality in the English to be fit for the representation of Mimi.
Yeah, it's disgusting. My calves are starting to look like a bodybuilder's. Like a what?
After then watching a few episodes, I felt like I more or less understood the characters of Digimon Adventure, so I took to Adventure Tri to see if I felt any different after going back to the beginning. Although I probably should have waited until I finished all of Adventure to go watch Tri, I couldn't constrain myself any longer, and I'm happy that I finally watched Adventure Tri. To elaborate just a little bit more on the importance of watching Digimon Adventure in Japanese, I need to talk about the animation studio behind the project, Toei Animation. See, Toei is a nostalgia factory. YouTuber Geekdom101 once made the comparison that Toei Animation is like the Japanese version of Disney. Although he didn't necessarily elaborate on the thought, I understand what he was talking about. Both Disney and Toei have a lineup of IPs that did very well for them years ago, and now they're both bringing them back to the forefront for nostalgia and for new fans. Right now, Disney is trying to start a renaissance of live adaptations of the original animated hits like The Jungle Book and Snow White, while Toei is doing more or less the same thing. In 2009, Toei Animation started production of the first Dragon Ball anime in 12 years, which was mostly a retelling of Dragon Ball Z without the filler. Then again in 2012, Toei announced that they were going to begin the production of a new Sailor Moon anime titled Sailor Moon Crystal. Once Dragon Ball Kai finished airing the Buu Saga in 2015, Toei Fuji TV struck a deal to start the production of Dragon Ball Super that was to fill the now vacant spot of Dragon Ball Kai. Depending on who you ask, Digimon was fortunate enough to receive the same treatment that Dragon Ball and Sailor Moon received. And if you ask me, yes, it's a great thing. It's even better than the Dragon Ball reboot because Digimon Adventure Tri is actually a follow-up to the Digimon Adventure series. Rather than being a retelling of the story we saw as kids, we now get to see the chosen children grow up, just like we have. The story is for those who grew up with the show back in 1999. With that said, to fully appreciate Tri, you need to go watch the original to understand these characters, because the dub changes aspects of the show that shake up the original narrative. One instance of this is Tentomon. In the English version, we get a Tentomon that is kind of a know-it-all, and he gives Izzy grief for preferring to be on the computer than to hang out with his friends. However, in the Japanese version, Tentomon notices Koshiro's thirst for knowledge, and he admires him for that. Another example of this is Sora and Piyomon. In the Japanese version, Sora goes through an emotional arc at the beginning of the series where she doesn't truly know if she actually wants to be held responsible for her Digimon. She even goes as far as to say that Piyomon is too needy. In the English version, this character arc was removed. It doesn't exist. Without trying to spoil Tri, both of these moments with Koshiro and Sora are plot points that make their way back to Adventure Tri, and there's just so much more emotional weight when you know these things. With all of that said, this thing about going back to watch the original is not solely exclusive to Digimon. This can be applied to anything that gets localized. The anime localization industry in the West has improved since the 90s, and since has become better about dealing with the source material when it comes to their localization. But nonetheless, it never hurts to go back to watch things in the original content. In the case of Digimon, you can certainly find enjoyment in something you didn't know was there before, which will ultimately reward you better when you're watching Adventure Tri. So if you like Digimon and you only remember watching it dubbed as a child, then go watch the original subbed. And go listen to the podcast Lost in Translation Mon to enrich your experience. Seriously, it's a pretty cool podcast. Now excuse me while I go back to watching my Digimans. Thanks for watching.